And then the nice thing about that is it's like driving your car. There's a million things under the hood of your car, but as long as the oil gauge is where it needs to be, the heat gauge is where it needs to be, and the gas gauge is where it needs to be, then I don't need to pop the hood. And so in the same way, I would say as long as you're, if you have one or maybe two KPIs for each of the 5 core functions of your business, as long as those are within the green zone for your business, don't pop the hood. But as soon as it does need to happen, well, now we pop the hood and we start to identify, okay, cost to acquire came over that number this week. Let's talk about why. Cost to acquire came way down this week. Let's talk about why. I don't care if it's good or bad. I want to measure it because once I measure it, I can move it.
Hey, it's the Profit Answer Man, Rocky Lalvani. If you're new to the podcast, check out my interview with Mike Michalowicz. It's episode number 2. If you want to hear about each chapter in the Profit First book, go back and listen to episodes 3 through 13. Episode 1 is the why and how. On the Profit Answer Man, we learn money mastery without all the complicated accounting mumbo-jumbo using a simple system. Your accountant is busy documenting your transactions and creating a rearview mirror of what happened. My guess is you don't even look at the reports they sent you. If you're like most business owners, you struggle with this, and it's not your fault. We aren't taught money in school, and accountants aren't taught how to be profitable. The Profit First system created by Mike Michalowicz works, and he certified me to help you implement the system in your business. Remember, the new equation is sales minus profit equals expenses. Let's face it, without cash flow, you can't pay your employees, buy needed materials, or pay your mortgage and support your family. I help you to do that and more, so you can focus on the parts of the business you love and receive the rewards for your labor and investment into your business. The stronger you are as a business owner, the more jobs you create, the better we are as a country. Small business owners are the backbone of America, and for that, you deserve to be well rewarded. Just remember, more revenue does not equal more profit. That's why we focus on the bottom line. Hey, we're doing something new. I'm going to have a live Q&A meeting on Zoom on March 22nd. At 1 p.m. Eastern Time. You can join us live and ask your questions. I'll be happy to answer them. If you can't make it that day, email your questions ahead of time and we'll put them in there and we'll answer them for all of you. So hopefully you can join us that day. I'm going to put a link in the show notes with Eventbrite code so that you can sign up and get notified and have the details for the call. So we hope to see you there on March 22nd. Today, we're going to chat about how to build your dynasty. Do you have core values that direct you towards building your company and the dynasty you're making? And also to help make sure you're in alignment with what you want, who you want to work with, and who you want to serve. When you're clear with what you want and you make sure you tell everyone and you stick to it, life and business become easier. You attract the people you want to be around and things are just more fun. I mean, that's the cool part about it. And you can be more profitable. We're also going to dig in today about how to increase your revenue and measure your results beyond just the basics. And then we're going to talk about the power of AI and ChatGPT and how that's changing the world and how it can improve your business. Our guest today is Jason Skeesick. He is a U.S. Army veteran, coach, and entrepreneurial evangelist. He's a father, husband, fighter, and carrier of heavy things. His company, Spear and Clover, helps businesses with passionate leaders, talented teams, and strong playbooks go from contenders to dynasty organizations. He leads the Spear and Clover Mastermind, a large group of like-minded entrepreneurs united in helping each other impact the world in their own unique missions. Let's meet Jason. Welcome to the Profit Answer Man, Jason Skeesick.
I think we should keep it in.
We'll keep it in. I've done this 500 times. You think I'd get it right?
Wow. I think you got it just fine, man.
Well, thank you. Can you share a little bit about yourself and your business?
Sure. For starters, my name is Jason Skeesick. I run a company called Spear and Clover LLC. We do a couple of different things. Number one, we're growing a tribe of entrepreneurs called the Spear and Clover Mastermind. And number two, we have a program called Dynasty Defined. We take entrepreneurs through the process of creating strong, solid foundations for their business, things like core values and mission, goal setting, things like that. And then we help them to scale the magic from between their ears out to their team using frameworks. So we help them put in SOPs. We help them really define in very clear, no uncertain terms, roles and responsibilities. And then we help them go take over the world. My background is pretty broad, as we've talked about before the show. I am a U.S. Army veteran. I served 4 years in the United States Army as a network engineer, which means I dug holes and pulled cable. And then when I got out, I did two things, Rocky. I went to school for finance and became a commercial banker. And on a whim, two other veteran friends and I started a CrossFit gym in the city of Chicago on the fourth floor of a dusty old warehouse building. And over the course of time, I realized that I was sitting in the top of this high rise working on $50 million deals. And all I could think about was my dusty CrossFit gym and the community of folks that I loved so much. So ended up through a circuitous path going full-time entrepreneur. And I've never looked back.
Some of us are unemployable.
Oh yeah, that is definitely one way to talk about it. You know, I haven't told this before on a podcast, but I was actually interviewing at the time. I was deciding between becoming an entrepreneur and giving it all up or going to work for this. It was like a proprietary trading firm in Chicago that would have been a very lucrative job. And I got to the final round of interviews and they rejected me. They took somebody else that was a better qualified candidate. And, I was a little disappointed, but then I became a full-time entrepreneur. And 6 months later, they called me up and were ready to offer me a job that would have been quite lucrative. And I just laughed. I was like, there's just no way that I'm going to come back to work in an office during office hours and like the market and all that other stuff. It just was not going to happen. It's
wonderful to get free.
Yeah, it sure is.
It's funny. A lot of the things that you talk about that you do for business owners don't want to do.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because my two core values, which is what the Spear and Clover stands for, is it's the spirit of the puppy, which is ADD or entrepreneur's disease. And I think that's who you're talking about, right? But it's military mindset. This is something that I gained in the Army. I wasn't born with that. And I enhanced it in commercial lending. And that was, discipline, hard work, attention to detail, taking responsibility when there's an opportunity. And so I retired for a year last year up until this November. And I actually went into a sensory deprivation float tank with the idea of what business would I fight for? What business would I stand on a mountain and beat my chest about? And those ideas that I just talked to you about are the ones. The only concern was how not sexy they were, which is why I refer to the company as Dynasty Defined, because the sexy way to talk about these types of ideas is in the form of the dynasty sports organizations that we love so much. Why are sports organizations not reliant on role players and not reliant on which plays are being called? How come, you can see a player like Ocho Cinco go to New England and all of a sudden you never hear about another problem from that person? And the reason is because these are organizations that are built on solid foundations. They know exactly who they are and they have frameworks in place to integrate anybody that comes aboard into their ideal employees, right? And so this is what I try to do and some of the ideas that I try to borrow to use for entrepreneurs.
One of the things we talk about is once you have your ideals, rather than trying to integrate into your ideals, is to hire to your ideals because it's almost impossible to change people. Yeah. So find the people who agree with you and bring those on board because it'll be so much easier. You can always teach the skills.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think of my core values, which you're referring to as ideals, and I agree, as a 5-sided puzzle piece. And the way that I proved to myself that it was accurate when I finished the process of revealing it was by holding it up to the light and comparing it to folks and decisions that I had made in the past. People that should have been great employees or people that should have been great clients that just for some reason we couldn't get it together. And every single time, one or more of those sides of that puzzle piece just wasn't a match. And so now going forward for the past several years, I've used that 5-sided puzzle piece to identify good opportunities, good new employees, potential clients that might be a good fit. And I've saved myself, I think, a lot of heartache from doing that.
But it makes it so much easier, though, doesn't it?
So much easier. It's so easy to speak in those terms. It would be very difficult for me to replace, if I were to say to you, Rocky, I really like Tom. Tom is spirit of the puppy, but he's not military mindset, so we can't hire him. I would love to hang out with him. I'll have beers with him. I can't hire him. That's a lot harder to do without that stand-in of those core values. It would be like, well, he's a nice guy. He's a good person. I think he's smart, but I think he's undisciplined, and I think he's this, and I think he's that. Whereas we have this rubric where we can just pull these concepts, which have these very heavy meanings within my organizations, and you just throw them around with just a couple of sentences.
How do you ensure they match that? Because, people come in interviews, they tell you all kinds of stories.
Yeah, they do. And I think, famously, Zappos is one of those companies that used all sorts of novel approaches to revealing these types of things. So, for instance, for Zappos, they would send a taxi cab to pick you up from the airport when you were going to interview with them. And one of the employees would be the driver of that car. And they would always, during an interview with a higher up, they would ask for you to hold on a moment while they left, called away on urgent business. And they would send in someone you knew their subordinate that they were subordinate to. And they would see how you treated that person. And so there were all these little things that they would do. I don't get that tricky. I'm not a huge organization like Zappos. But one thing that I do is I actually build core value questions into my interview. It's so much more about culture fit. And so if I want to reveal, for instance, if somebody is spirit of the puppy, I simply ask them what they were like as a kid. And I see if their eyes light up, and I see if they tell me that they're playful, and I see if they get excited to talk about it. And there's a number of other little techniques that I do, but I do center my identification process around the core values, not around the tactics or the skills that we need. That would be later in the process. And frankly, some of the best employees, no, let me rephrase that. All of the best employees that I've ever had have been core value fits. And the further I get into being an entrepreneur, the higher my hit rate is. And it's only by focusing more on core values.
So how do you determine your core values and come up with essentially that list or that rubric?
That's a good question. So there's a number of different ways that people do it. I do it a pretty unique way. Most of it starts the same. I ask folks to take time to write down a list of 50 or more, words or short phrases that describe them as they are. And they do that. And then I ask them to do that with their husband or wife, with their mother or father, with their brother or sister, or with their business partner to get some feedback without coloring. And then we take that list and we divide it into what I think 4 sections. It's who am I? In my case, that's spirit of the puppy, and military mindset combines to be who I am. Then we look for how do I work? How do I get things done? For me, that phrase is head up, feet moving. So I'm always moving towards my goals, but I'm also looking left and right. But there's a whole list of words that came up to that point. Another was how I relate to others. How do I best communicate in the workplace and with clients and with prospects, right? For me, that's tribal. I'm very tribal. If you can't tell, I'm wearing my hat with my symbol on it. I have a tattoo on my forearm. My other tattoo is my other logo. I'm very tribal. And then the last is what gets us out of bed in the morning? What drives us forward? And for me, that word is invested. So I get out of bed, I get to work and are pulled towards my work because I'm invested in the results of my clients. I'm invested in the results of my business and my constituents and those folks around us in our sphere of influence. And so once you've got that list, you start to separate it down into tranches like who you are, how you work, how you communicate with others, and what gets you out of bed in the morning. Once we do that, then it's simply copywriting. And so the beauty of working with me is we do that in a workshop with 5 other entrepreneurs and myself. And over the period of time, we winnow that down to something that is meaningful without being cliche, right? So one of my favorites is trial by water. One of my recent employees, one of his core values is trial by water. And I just love that because immediately, trial by fire, but it's different enough that it doesn't carry any weight from previous associations with it. And so it's immediately understandable. Spear and clover, spirit of the puppy. Spirit of the puppy is not something you've heard other than from me probably, but as soon as you hear it, you kind of understand what I'm getting at, right? High energy, loves to play, loves to meet new people, excited to meet you, tries new things, adventurous. That's spirit of the puppy. Well, I said that, and maybe you've never heard that phrase before, but I would guess that you would have probably guessed something like that, right?
So when you're looking to hire people, are they the same as you then? Or are they different? Or do they have to fit into that? Like, are you hiring clones?
Absolutely not. I've made that mistake in the past, right? And so a couple of points. One, I do think that the type of company you have should dictate sort of the style of core values that you have. I am what I would define as like the charismatic central figure of a tribal business. If I was running a manufacturing concern, I probably wouldn't use core values. I'd probably use core tenets, much more based on like adjectives, much more based on how we deliver, how we do work, how we work together. Core tenets are a lot more easy for folks to adopt. If I ran Amazon, it would be core tenets, right? If I'm running a yoga studio, it's core values. And so no, you don't have to identify somebody. If you've ever read the book Traction, you want to find someone who is a core value fit, who also for that role is in the right seat. And so they have to be GWC. They have to get it. They have to want it, and they have to be able to be capable of fulfilling on it. And so if you can check those three boxes and their core value fit, certainly I am not go ahead, Rocky.
No, that's the biggest struggle I've been hearing lately is people want people to do stuff, but people don't want to do that. And I'm like, well, then stop having them do that because they're 100%. Not a right fit and they won't do it and they won't do it well. If there's areas that are their zone of genius, you got to figure out how to let them stay there.
This is the best time that somebody's asked me this question because I think you and I are good examples of that. I have spoken to you now for maybe 30 minutes and I like you. And I think that we get along on a lot of things. And I bet you if we went and sat at a coffee shop and had a long conversation beyond this, we would walk away as friends. But I bet you there are things that give you energy that would drain me if I was to try and do them, just knowing what you do for a living. And same thing in reverse. And so I can tell you many stories of folks that I've either employed or worked with at the bank where, they get energy from seeing order or fine tuning the details of the covenants in a loan document or any number of very, very draining things for me. These are things that I can do, but that would drain my energy,
Does anyone get energy from that? Really?
Yes, 100%. I will tell you right now, I could name them personally right now. I'll tell you, here's one of the ways that I knew I didn't belong in banking. I was working under an underwriter who was fantastic, but I don't want to put his name out there. And he told me one day, he's like, Jason, let me tell you about me. Every single morning I pull out of my garage and I close the door and then I drive around the block and drive past my house to make sure the garage went down. And I go, that's just not me. And that's totally you. And I get that it's you. And the order that you get from that is so wonderful. If you ever tell me something is X, Y, and Z, I know that I can trust it's X, Y, and Z. But do not put me to be the guardian of the gate on whether or not the numbers are right or the garage door went down, if that makes sense.
My real estate attorney is like that. And I love him because he will go into the details of reading things and he'll be like, and I'm like, seriously? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, whatever you say. And I've learned when I find people who are good at what they do, I don't question them. Mm-hmm. Like, do we really have to drive around the block and look if the door's down? I'm not going to question you. That's your thing. And I will let it be. And when I need to make sure that the business is locked up tight at the end of the night, you're my guy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I could give you 5 other examples of where you could see it. You could see there's a thing where you're doing a job that's perfunctory. And then there's a thing where you're doing a job that you are personally compelled to see done. And I can tell you right now, I personally know, and I'm this way with things that some people might not be drawn to do. I'm working on a lot of automations and sales and marketing and building landing pages and stuff right now. And that would probably sound like a slow death to most people. But for me, it's one of those things where I will not rest until I know that the headers are the right size and the fonts all line up and because at this point in my entrepreneurial career have connected that connective tissue between those tasks and my desired outcome, which is helping and serving more and more people on a bigger scale.
Makes a lot of sense. And a lot of that, I think, is that introspection, knowing who you are, being able to read who others are, and then being very, very good at that in the sense that, a lot of times we'll get together with somebody and, oh, you're a Phillies fan. I'm a Phillies fan. Oh, you must be great. Let's hire you. Yeah. Instead of looking at the actual metrics that do matter, not just whether or not they're a nice person, they stroked your ego or whatever it is, and wondering why you end up in a mess the next day going down. So let's actually talk a little bit about that. You talked about how you're into building automations and all of that. That's the whole front end of business is sales. And we like to talk about, as we create those equations, how many people are we getting in front of their eyeballs? What's our conversion rate? And then what does that turn into average sale wise and so forth? And then what does all of that cost? Because the marketing people drive me up the wall. They're like, hey, if you gave me $1 and I gave you $2 a business, you keep putting $1 in my account. And I'd be like, no, our gross profit is only 40%. Every time I give you $1 and you give me $2, I lose money. I can't afford that kind of marketing. So it's understanding the math behind it. You're a big fan of figuring out cost to acquire. How do you do that?
Well, before I get into the technical, and I would love, this is the first time anybody's asked me to get in the weeds, but I love getting into the weeds on that stuff. I want to start with how I look at the funnel, because I think this is a big kind of short in the system of way most passionate entrepreneurs look at the front end of their business. They think about, the traditional funnel. You have $1,000 that goes in, you get 100 leads from that, 50 of them book, 25 of them show, and then maybe 15 of them close. That's your sales funnel. And then you look at that and you say, okay, we spent $1,000. We got this much contracted value. That's our cost to acquire. But as somebody who's passionate about the things that I do and the people that I work with, this is a requirement. You must be who you say you are. And so if you say you're here to help people and you say you're here to make a difference in the world, as long as that box is checked, then the worst thing in the world that could happen is you are who you say you are. And 100 people raise their hand saying they want to change their life or experience the transformation that you offer. And you tell 90 of them to screw off. That to me is abhorrent. So I flip the sales funnel. I don't look at how many dollars I make based on how much money I put in. I look at how many people I'm helping in regards to how many people raised their hands. And I found that to be a much stronger motivator, particularly for passionate entrepreneurs and their teams. That being said, I do look at a quickly scaling business needing to have a cost to acquire that is at least that's no more than half of their average front end cash. And so if you have $1,000 product, you can spend up to $500 in order to go out and buy one of those clients. I don't know your business and your area of expertise well enough to comment on the $1 and $2 thing you mentioned earlier. So maybe you want to react to what I just said.
Well, so you're telling me if I've got $1,000 product and I've got $500 to acquire that sale, that really depends. Most businesses don't have the margin to support that. They would actually lose money doing that. Now, it depends on the business. Some businesses have that kind of. So if you're in a software business and you essentially have no cost of delivery, yeah, that works. Or if you have it in a repetitive client. So, okay, it cost me that for the first client for the first order, but they're going to order 12 times this year. Okay, now it's $12,000 and it cost me $500. Yes, I'll buy $500 for $12,000, but $500 for $1,000, I think most businesses would quickly go bankrupt.
So it's funny you say that because typically the folks I work with are service entrepreneurs that have recurring revenue for a 12-month contract. And so absolutely double your money on the front end so that you have cash flow to go out and buy more clients. But yeah, 10x your 10 or 12. In my case, I usually say 10x on total contract value. And then the nice thing about that is it's like driving your car. There's a million things under the hood of your car, but as long as the oil gauge is where it needs to be, the heat gauge is where it needs to be, and the gas gauge is where it needs to be, then I don't need to pop the hood. And so in the same way, I would say as long as you're, if you have one or maybe two KPIs for each of the 5 core functions of your business, as long as those are within the green zone for your business, don't pop the hood. But as soon as it does need to happen, well, now we pop the hood and we start to identify, okay, cost to acquire came over that number this week. Let's talk about why. Cost to acquire came way down this week. Let's talk about why. I don't care if it's good or bad. I want to measure it because once I measure it, I can move it.
And if you know why it came down, that's phenomenal because you're doing something right. You've got great copy, something works, something changed. Let's go for it. So going back to the analogy, I think this is the biggest thing people don't realize. As they scale their business, they don't say, okay, how much gas is in the car and how many miles do I have to go? They're like, well, the tank's full. I can make it. No, it's going to require 3 tanks to get where you're going. Do you have 3 tanks? Okay. Just because the gauge says full doesn't mean you're going to make it. So just being aware of that. And most of that stuff can literally be done on the back of a napkin. It doesn't take a lot. You just have to think through, if I put $1 out today, when is it coming back to me? Because that's where things get scary. Sometimes you put $1 out in advertising, and in some businesses, I might not get my dollar back for 9 months, which means I have to plan for every month that dollar going out. So I'm out $9 before my first dollar comes back. You multiply that by 100,000 and you're talking real dollars here.
Yeah, I had my first encounter with what's called a cash flow crunch right after we started to really turn around I took my business from a hobby to what I call a capital B business in 2017. And when we did, we had our first cash flow crunch really quickly. We had $9,000 revenue when I quit my job and became full time. Within 12 months, we hit $90,000 revenue. But the problem was, we were about 3 months into that. We were at like 40 or 50. And then I turned off ads and went on vacation for a week. And all of the sudden, or actually ads stayed on, but sales weren't happening. And so because of that, I think we were spending like $8,000 a month on marketing. And we had that cash flow crunch that you're talking about. It's like that tsunami that seems like it's only 4 feet. And then when it starts to come up to shore, you're like, whoa, we're not ready for that. And then it just wham, levels everything. And so, I don't think we needed a bridge loan, but it was one of those things where we had to drag our feet a little bit for a couple of days to catch up. And, that was a lesson that I will not soon forget.
And I think that happens more often than not in businesses. We all just think, oh, we're growing and sales are coming in, but you've got to actually watch the cash flow and say what's really happening and what is that cash conversion cycle for my particular business. And every business is different. And that's where you start to learn, okay, we bill at the end of the month and then they pay in 30 days we bill up front, right? And
absolutely, that
changes the world. And I think it might have been Best Buy, some kind of retailer that actually was able to grow because they got their goods on 90 days and they were getting their cash up front. All their vendors were actually financing their growth for free.
They get their own bank. Yeah.
And they had their own bank. So it works both ways, just understanding that and knowing how to do it. Since we're on this whole topic of top of funnel and doing all of this, the world's changing. One of the hottest things I'm hearing about right now, and I've played around with it and I'm like, wow, is ChatGPT. Yeah. And it is... people are talking about it being a game changer. Now, ChatGPT is Microsoft, right?
It's OpenAI, which actually was founded by Elon Musk, which is funny that you don't hear his name being thrown around about it. But yeah.
Okay. But who owns it now?
OpenAI is a not-for-profit that owns it. It's a for-profit company owned by a not-for-profit. I don't know how they did that.
Okay. The reason I was asking, because I heard Microsoft and Bing was looking to...
They're talking about a JV. Yeah.
Okay. That's how Bing wants to beat Google at the search game.
Yeah, it's just going to make it easier for you to go to Bing and ask for Google.
Well, maybe.
I'm just kidding. That was a joke. I once heard a comedian say that the number one search on Bing is how do I get to Google? So
we're not going to talk about those people.
Yeah.
How do you see it changing the business world?
I mean, immensely. It absolutely is a game changer. I have been, just to give you an idea of what I've done in the last week since I really started digging in on ChatGPT, I spent 2 days where I dove in on it, and I've used it every single day transactionally. But the very first thing I did was a Muse project. I was like, how do I just immerse myself in the technology and just stretch myself a little bit and figure out how to incorporate it into my life? Well, one of the things that I do a lot of as a server of entrepreneurs is I create courses, and I put together course content and use that to teach concepts. And so what I did is in one day from 8 a.m. until 9:30 p.m. with 2 or 3 calls in there somewhere, I conceived, generated, and recorded, edited, made the marketing for, and launched an entire course on how to use ChatGPT to generate online courses only using, it was a meta-analysis, only using ChatGPT. And so I didn't do, the only thing that I did anything with to edit was the delete key and the video that announces it. I said, hey, basically everything else that you see from here on in is my Muse project. Everything's been generated completely in ChatGPT. And so to give you an idea, Rocky, what that means is I came up with an outline for how to generate a course. Then I asked it to actually do the copywriting of the slides and the script. So the bullet pointed slides and the fully executed script. I then recorded that. I then put that into a simple template, a slide template that I already had. And I recorded that. I dropped that into Descript, which, believe it or not, is actually powered by OpenAI, which is powered by DaVinci 3, which is the model that is underneath of ChatGPT. And then I edited that using that AI program. And then I created a landing page. The everything from the call to action to the body to the description was all generated in ChatGPT. And then the email campaigns, everything, complete automation from front to back, as well as the social media post, was all generated in ChatGPT. And along the way, I learned how to engage with the software. And so to kind of get off of my own horn and explain how any entrepreneur can use it, think about the things that you do in your business creatively. Writing an email campaign, writing a new marketing campaign, coming up with new products, coming up with some sort of correspondence, social media posts, anything, videos, scripts, any of that stuff. The thing that keeps you from doing more of it is not the 10% of ideation and perfection that actually makes it unique to you. It's the 90% of what I would call boring kind of busy work, the scaffolding, the copywriting to make things sound right. And this completely eliminates the need for that. And so you could potentially go in there, Rocky, and say, write me a 10 email drip campaign promoting my profit first centric program, and also have using a call to action to download our free ebook. And then once it does, you could say, now do it again, but make it a more casual tone with a little bit of humor, and it'll do that remarkably well.
In the amount of time that you were speaking, I told it to tell me how to implement Profit First. And it wrote out the entire thing. It even knew that it was a book by Mike Michalowicz, told me all the, in 5 steps what to do, and delivered a result. If I had to sit down and think about doing that, because I had to, that would have taken me a while. But here, while I'm chatting with you, I've already got a framework to work off of. And then from there, you build and work. And I think for a lot of business owners, copywriting isn't their thing. Or even just, coming up with employee rules or a return policy or something along those lines. I saw somebody this morning on Twitter had said, I needed someone owed them money. I needed something for them to pay me and to give them terms and say that. And he goes, I went into ChatGPT. It gave me something. I sent it to the person. He said they didn't pay me. They refused to, but at least I didn't spend $250 on an attorney, right? So it changes the world. I think all of this AI stuff from a writing standpoint is going to be night and day in making things better, and even creating employee manuals, creating policies and everything else. It will help you so much with the frameworks. It's all free. It's all instantaneous. So, cost of goods of production is next to nothing.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe to kind of go to 1 degree lower, to 1 degree deeper on that tier, some other things that you can do with it. Number one, this is super interesting. One of my former mentors just posted yesterday. He put all of his customer testimonials into ChatGPT as the data set. And then what it spit out was unbelievable copy because it understood exactly the benefits that people were getting and why it was valuable to them and what their experiences were. So writing good sales copy is very doable. Number two, you can license DaVinci 3, which is they have several other models that you can license, and you can apply your own data set. Well, for instance, I imagine there's probably a Profit First forum out there somewhere. You could easily web scrape all of the things that have ever been written by or about Profit First, by or about the folks that are constituents of it, and it will then generate answers within that sandbox. And so, as a former CrossFit guy, there's a huge resource called the CrossFit Forum where I could just web scrape that and create a digital master CrossFit trainer that can just answer any question, generate any program, help you with injuries, and nutrition, anything. And so there's just, and it also generates code. You can generate apps, you can generate websites, you can generate HTML, images, very quickly. It can generate images and copy. And eventually it'll do sound, and video is just multiple images, and sound is just copy. And, very quickly you'll be able to generate a movie, that's based on AI completely.
And I was playing around with, you mentioned Descript for a while. I decided to skip it, but if you use Descript properly, it will actually mimic my voice. So I can just type and it will do it, which means I could take the ChatGPT, drop it in there, and, next time, Jason, I don't need a guest. I'll just tell ChatGPT to create the podcast episode.
Yeah, I use Descript every day, and it's fantastic. For people who don't know, I think there's this barrier to entry that we have in our minds as entrepreneurs of like, oh, I'm not a video editor, and neither was I. But when you upload a video into there, it actually just creates what's essentially a Word document to the left of the screen. And all you do is edit the words on the page like you would an essay, and it edits the audio and the video alongside it. It's fantastic.
The world is changing. You got to get out and learn because someone else is. So it's not like you can't ignore this because your competitor is not ignoring it. And if they can pick up an advantage because of it, I mean, let's face it, for many businesses, marketing is a major expense. And from a marketing standpoint, I think that's one of the greatest things that this does. And even for basic things that you've got to do within your company, even writing an email, right? I need to write an email XYZ. This at least gives you a framework so that you can now go back and edit and gets rid of writer's block.
Yeah. I'll never forget this. This happened to me, and I posted this before I heard about ChatGPT, but it stands. I was in the airport about a month and a half ago, and I saw a guy on one of those big giant airport escalators, the 2-floor ones. And he's just standing on the escalator like everybody does. And it just occurred to me in that instant that the guy who designed the escalator did it so people could get where they're going faster. An average person uses it to be lazy. And then I looked at my cell phone, and now we bring it to the context of ChatGPT. And so if you're out there listening to this and you're an entrepreneur, AI is going to have the power to make your life easier. But it also has the power to have you make a much bigger impact in a much more impactful and easy way. And so I encourage you to try and walk up that escalator.
I agree. If people would like to learn more about you, your programs, podcast, how do they go about doing that?
Well, for starters, Rocky, I would ask if anybody is still listening to this, it's for a good reason. It's because they like you and they like this show. And Rocky is putting his heart and soul into creating what I think is a very fantastic, very informational show. And so first go to his page, review, and share that with somebody else, because he's doing this all for you for free. And if you still have any energy left, then by all means, you can find me at www.spearandclover.com. My platform of choice is Instagram. I'm Jason Skeesick on there, as well as Spear and Clover. And I'm putting up short form videos with, entrepreneurial analysis pretty much daily. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, all that. And the Spear and Clover podcast is posted to our YouTube channel as well as all audio platforms weekly.
And we'll try and get some of that in the show notes.
If you could only do one thing, like Rocky's show, if you could do two things, find me at spearandclover.com.
And we'll make sure that we put that in there. Thank you so much for joining us today.
All right. Thanks, Rocky. I've had a real good time.
Are you clear on your values? Do you tell everybody about them? Do you hire to them? This makes your business so much more fun and more profitable. Are you clear on the KPIs you need to measure to keep track of and ensure your business is running smoothly? Lastly, this stuff with ChatGPT and AI is incredible. How are you using it to make your life easier? It's amazing. We've got clients using it to write ad copy, create emails, even terms of service. It is just making things go so much faster and easier, but it's not perfect. You still got to go back in and do your parts, but it really helps you to get things done a little bit faster. Actually, you can even create marketing and blog posts and all kinds of stuff. I would check it out. And that leads us into what we always close with. You don't need more resources. You need to be more resourceful. AI is one way to do that. Let's remember to focus on the bottom line.
If you'd like for us to be a part of your profitability journey, we have different programs available ranging from do-it-yourself to one-on-one coaching. Our course, The Profit Blueprint, teaches you everything you need to know to transform your profitability. There are 3 different tiers ranging from DIY to done with you so that businesses of all sizes can get the support that's best. Join the waitlist in the show notes to get more information and be a part of the next cohort. If you want a done-for-you service, you can hire us as your Chief Profitability Officers. We only work with a handful of clients, so they all get our full attention. We work with business owners who have or are growing to $500,000 to $10 million in revenue. You can use the scheduling link in the show notes to get on our calendar for a good fit conversation to see if we're the right people to support you and how we can help you.
This episode of the Profit Answer Man podcast is brought to you by SMBpodcastnetwork.com. The network is a collection of podcasts and shows from around the internet which focus on bringing you interviews with amazing guests who share actionable advice, ideas, and information for small and medium-sized business owners and entrepreneurs. Visit www.smbpodcastnetwork.com to find more great shows and easily subscribe to be notified of new episodes. It's a great way to discover quality content. If you've discovered us via the network, then I hope you enjoy today's show and will consider subscribing directly so you never miss our episodes. Remember to check out my other podcast, Richer Soul, where we talk about how to live the ultimate life and be the best business owner you can be. As we close out, let's repeat the mantra. Revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, and cash is king. Have an abundant and profitable week.